Like circle?
No, you guys don't go back close, so. Well, I'm telling you right now, as hot as we had it in here, you can turn on the heat. There ain't nothing that I'm putting on that's gonna save it.
When you find out,
I mean, it's upsetting. I knew the whole time. As there was sweat running down my back and down my crack, I knew exactly. Huh? I got a chill.
you're getting moist.
Yeah.
Moist. Oh.
Hey, that reminds me of cake.
Like a cake,
Please
yeah.
don't talk about it.
That's
So
what
like
they say
moist
about
cakes,
velvet cake.
moist cake.
You don't like red velvet, you said.
I like hers.
So many things.
I like
you
velvet
like red
velvet
chocolate cake?
better than red.
Oh. You like your deep red velvet cake, Catherine?
It's not deep red, it's like a red red. Like not chocolate in it.
No, yeah, I do. Like, boy, I like this.
This is the way it is.
Yeah, I got
What?
it.
Is that a book cover or what?
All right. All right. Here we go. We're going to get this thing kicked off. So I've got a lot of stuff I want to go over. And so first things first, how many of you guys know that there is a town hall conference call on the 7th? Okay. There is a Larry Winters is doing something on the 29th. Okay, down in Durham. And then there's also a thing going on where Doug Weir's doing an event on Saturday. That they're gonna have the ability to stream, I believe. So they're gonna be doing all this stuff, and here's what I'll tell you is, and know my heart on this, we're not doing any of them. Nope. So I spoke with Thomas and I spoke with Mark Elson Peter. And honestly, like I was super excited about all of them because I was like, hey, listen, this would be a great opportunity to go see Larry. And it'd be a great opportunity to go see or to listen in on Doug. And he said, I basically was speaking with Thomas and Mark, and they basically said, that's $15 a piece per person, plus a trip down there, plus you guys are going to eat dinner, plus all this other stuff, right? And he said, it just doesn't make sense to do right now because the number one priority, I think, and this is basically what it came down to, is he said, you gotta, you know, in your business, you've got to have priorities, right? And honestly, there are enough things going on. Now, if we were, I think that it's great to go and get around Larry. I think it's great to go get around Doug. And this is what they told me. They said, listen, normally I would say go for it. But they said, right now, you guys are on the grow. And the number one thing that we need to have importance is getting people to conference. He said, you know, you need to have a focus right now. And he said, typically, here's what happens. He said, sometimes you get in this, you get in the fight for something, right? And the fight should be right now to get more people to conference, right? And right now, all the low-hanging fruit have already been taken care of, right? Matt, you've got your ticket, your low-hanging fruit, right? I mean, Matt, we already know Matt's going to go to conference, right? We already know that you're going to go to conference. We already know these things. And so typically what happens is then we fool ourselves by, oh, we're building our business because we're going to go to this meeting, and then we're going to go to this meeting, and we're going to go do this, and we're going to go do this. And we aren't doing the things that actually are going to grow our business, right? And that is setting up times to sit down with people, showing more plans, booking people into more plans, doing follow-ups, you know, going out and contacting, you know, because, I mean, literally, we could take Friday night off, Saturday off, and because you're not going to get home till super late on Sunday, you're going to take Sunday off, and now your whole weekend's gone. Well, we only got so many more weekends before conference. And so, and then you've got New Year's Eve. That's going to basically be shot, right? Because nobody's going to want to see the plan on New Year's Eve, right? And so you've got all this stuff that's coming up. And so sometimes it's really easy to get distracted. And so, I'm just trusting my upline on this. And I want to go see Larry as bad as the next guy.
Right. And but I know that the more important thing is for you to have another guest, for you to have an in-person conference. Right. And so right now, really what I'm asking, and I talked to Thomas about this, and he said, we need to get really focused as a team. And he's talking about the Sharp team. So he said we need to get really focused as a team, because if you don't go see Larry, and you don't get to plug into Doug on Friday and Saturday night, but then you go home and watch a football game on Saturday night, and you don't do anything, you might as well just went and hung out with Doug. Because that would have been more productive, right? And so if you're going to go home and do nothing, then, us being focused really isn't being focused, right? So right now we're in a time crunch. We've got like a limited number of days until we have a conference, right? And it's even more of a time crunch because most people get paid bi-weekly, right? And then on top of that, everybody's got to have their leave in 2 weeks in advance, roughly. Right? So we've got all these things coming up. And so if we wait any longer than right now, we're gonna miss opportunities. So the goal and the focus needs to be right now is showing plans, getting tickets purchased, making sure that we're wrapping up volume because it is the end of the month. So we can't be laying eggs on that. Okay. So that means that, right now, as I'm standing here, who on your team, right, needs to move volume still? Right? And how much volume? If I said, Matt, how much more volume do you have coming in? I'm not going to do that to Matt, but can you answer them? Do you know the actual number? Right? Because, one of the things that I do is on my computer at work, James has seen it, is I literally have a spreadsheet every day. I look at it and I update it. It takes like 10 minutes. But it has every single one of your guys' name on it, and it has how many points you're on, how many points you have, and it has how many points your whole team has. And so that way I know who
5 months. And 550 points is not too far from 600, right? So George could have been a new 600 a while ago. In fact, he's got a bigger team than a lot of people in this room. You know, he's got like 7 people going to conference right now. Okay, moving 550 points. And I said, well, why is that? You know, and we're talking about it. And I think that, you know, how many of you guys want to sponsor people? And what's the purpose of sponsoring somebody? Duplicate, right? Now, let me ask you a question. Would you actually want to duplicate your mentality? Because if you're duplicating, then understand that you don't get to pick and choose what you duplicate. Would you really want to duplicate your mentality? And that mentality has got to go past what you feel, right? So let me give you an example. I was talking to George about this, and so George's got 7 people on his team, and then I started talking to Shamar and Caitlin about this because I got on the phone with them, and honestly, like, I truly believe George could be 1,000 this month. Okay, like I've done the math, I know how it is, and I know exactly what the situation is. You know, I've sat down and did budgets with everybody on that team except one person, and I'm doing a budget with the next person tomorrow. Why? Because I'm not just hoping they go 1,000. I'm not just hoping they move points. I'm going to help them move points. I'm going to show them how to move points. Okay, I created, hey, listen, do you know that George, you know, when I talked to George, one of the things I talked to him about doing, this isn't a comfortable thing to talk about, but let me just be honest. If somebody's broke and they want to build a business, then here's what they have to be willing to do. They have to be willing to pay the price. They can't pay the price financially, right? And meaning that they're not just going to be able to go buy the points, right? Because they can't afford to. You know, when I got in business, I couldn't afford to buy the points, but listen, if you think you're going to get away from paying the price, you're wrong. You're either going to pay it financially or you're going to pay it with your discipline and action. And preferably you do it with both. Okay? Does that make sense? Now, if you're hearing this and you're like, well, Clint, I can't, I'm broke. Well, I was broke too. So here's what I had to do is I had to be more disciplined than everybody else. And that meant when George got started, George didn't have a job. He was a college student. Right? He still doesn't have a job. Okay, so he builds his business completely off of doing odds and ends stuff. Okay, and he gets a few dollars here and a few dollars there. Okay, but he builds his whole business off of that. So one of the things I had to talk to George about is, and he lives with his mom, so he's not buying a lot of his own stuff. So I had to talk to George. I said, hey, listen, the stuff that you do buy and the meals that you do have, you know, what we sat down is we realized that George was spending a lot of money. You know, he's spending almost like $20-some a day on food. And I said, George, I said, cool. Breakfast and lunch, you're not allowed to eat anything but Amway products. Now, do you think that he liked that idea? No, because George likes meat and potatoes. And we joke around about it, but so do I. Right? And so, but here's the thing is I like success more than I like meat and potatoes, though. Right? And so I had to talk to George, and I said, George, you need to change these 2 meals. I said, the 3rd meal, you can eat whatever you want. And you know what was really cool is that gave George a battle to fight. Right? It gave him something where he could go out and physically go do that and have victory in his business. Right? And some people, here's what I realized, and this is what I did. A lot of times I was scared to tell people what it was going to take, but because I was scared to tell people what it was going to take, they continued to have no results. And because they continued to have no results, they continued to get frustrated. And then eventually they frustrated themselves right out of business. Right? Wouldn't you rather just know what it was going to take? Like, wouldn't you just rather have somebody be honest with you and say, hey, listen, this is what I did. You can do it too. Right? Which ultimately means that you have to be willing to do it. What are you duplicating? The longer that you try to avoid paying the price, the more you're going to duplicate people that are avoiding paying the price. Because what I loved about I'm very, very proud that Addie and I did that. Did I like it? Nope. But you know what was funny is once I got over doing it, I then started to take pride in it. George was telling me, he said, Clint, you should be a financial planner, because I told him I sat down with everybody on his team, which, by the way, is really, really important. He said, I sat down with everybody on his team. Why didn't I have George do it? Because he hasn't mastered it yet. right? But I sat down with everybody on his team and I helped them come up with a financial plan. Okay? And so, and he said to me, he goes, Clint, you should be a financial planner. He said, I really want to do that. I really want to help people like on a like worldly level, like with their finances. And he said, how do I do that? And I said, well, George, let me ask you a question. Do you have a budget? And he said, yeah. And I said, do you know how you created the budget? Yeah. I said, then you can help people. Because most people don't even have a budget. Do you know that Addie and I redid our budget today? Now, our budget probably consists of some things that it didn't used to consist of, right? But that's a good thing. We have more money left over at the end of the month than we did when we started, which is a good thing, right? How many of you guys are excited about that? Okay. Well, then here's the deal. You know you can make $10,000, $11,000, $12,000 a month and still have nothing? Because I'm telling you, for real, the more money you make, the more nice things you like. And you stop buying $20 purses and you start buying $300 purses because you can. And shoes. And all kinds. You guys get what I'm saying? Right? And so all of a sudden $10,000 becomes the same as $4,000. Right? And that's why you got to have a budget, because otherwise you look at yourself. And there have been months where Addie and I have been like, wow, where'd all our money go? Because we were supposed to have this left over and we had like a fraction of it left over. What happened, Addie? You know, and Addie's looking at me and I'm looking at her and I'm like, gosh, we got to get this in line, right? But my point is that here's the deal. It's not about being perfect. It's, can you do it? Right? And then is it okay to say that, you know, there are going to be times when you know that you're supposed to contact and you know that you're supposed to have been contacting, and all of a sudden you wake up one morning and you're like, crap, I haven't got contacts in 3 days. And you're like, hey, listen, I need to get back on track. Right? Guys, it's not about whether or not you're going to be perfect, because you're not. You're going to get off track. You're going to take the wrong turn. You're going to get distracted. But the point is let me ask you a question. How long do you stay distracted? How long do you stay making the same bad mistakes? How long are you going to continue to do that? Because the goal is the faster that you can notice. So, see, here's the deal. You should be constantly analyzing you should be constantly being analytical about what you're doing. Right? Not to the point where it's I mean, like, oh, I can never do this right? But to the point where I can always get better. I can always improve. You know, what could I be doing better? How could I be doing this better? You know, and so I was talking to George about this, and I said, George, it's really, really simple. I said, isn't it funny that, because we were talking about creating extra volume and George growing his business, and I said, you know, eventually you're going to have enough people in your business that you're going to go over 1,000 points. I said, George, honestly, you should have been over 1,000 points a long time ago. So him and I got in this conversation about why he wasn't. And, you know, we got in this conversation, Shamar and Caitlin and I got in this conversation about why this hasn't happened. Right? And the big thing that Shamar and Caitlin and I were talking about was the fact that, you know, I said, honestly, if nobody knew the answer to this, and it was just me and you on the phone, and it was, and I said, I'm never going to tell anybody what you said. I said, if you had to rate yourself as an IBO, I'm not talking about you versus other people in the room. I'm talking about you and what you know about you. What would you rate yourself? How would you rate yourself? Are you good? Are you good? Are you a bad IBO? Are you you know, a great IBO? I mean, how would you rate yourself? And so you can look at yourself and you can say, so what we tend to do is we tend to look at the things we're good at and we say, hey, well, I contact and other people don't contact, so I'm a good IBO. And maybe you look at yourself and you say, well, and you don't say, well, I don't move any volume. You don't talk about what you're bad at, right? But I'm talking about if you put all the categories up here, like, so you're contacting, right? Your volume, your example. Right? So is it just about volume, or is it about when it goes in? Right? Is it about contacting, or is it about your consistency contacting? Does that make sense? You guys get what I'm saying? So we can always get better at everything. But like, if you had to rate yourself on a 1 to 10 in each of these, how would you rate yourself? Right? So how would you rate yourself? And they gave me an answer. And you know what was funny is their answer was kind of low. Stop thinking you have to go find somebody special. Stop trying to find somebody that is already arrived. Stop. And listen, it would be great to sponsor somebody. Like, I'm not telling you not to talk to those people, but the problem is that some of us are so picky and we go into every conversation, we go into every opportunity judging so much. By the way, hey, listen, if you go into the opportunity and you're like, oh, gosh, you are so sharp. You know what you're doing? You're judging them. You're judging them. You can judge somebody based off of how bad they are just as well as how good that you think they are. And when you judge them, here's what you do. You take yourself out of the game. Because that's not your job. Your role is not to judge. Your role is to offer. Does that make sense? Take some pressure off of yourself. Could you sponsor you when you got in? Some of you say, well, I don't want to sponsor me when I got in. Why? For the majority of you guys in here, I would love to have another Kevin and Liz that do 300 points. I would love to have another Ruben and Wendy that do 300 points. I would love to have another, some of you guys, I would love to have another Edward, single guy doing 300 points. Edward, have you figured everything out? Nope. Clint, have you figured everything out? Nope. Does it matter? Yes, it does matter. But am I working at it? Hey, is Edward here right now? How many people have you sponsored in your life that don't do 300 points and don't show up to stuff? I'm really excited about Edward being here. You know what I mean? Like, why are we, I get it. You want to sponsor somebody that's going to light the world on fire, right? But let me ask you a question. Why is it that you're so obsessed with finding that person? Is it because you're just lazy and not willing to do what you need to do? You want them to get in business and it to be easy for you to be their upline. You don't want to have to sit down with them and make their budget with them. You don't want to sit down and have the hard conversations with them. You just want them to get in and be perfect. I got news for you. That ain't going to happen. Wesley, we're going to have a conversation. I guarantee it sometime. And you're not going to like it. And I'm not going to like it either. But you know it's a part of being on a team? Hey, listen, Wesley, you play any sports? Do you ever play any sports? Recreational? Do you have a coach? The coach ever get in your hind end? Do you know that I've had conversations with Mark that I don't enjoy? Like when he asks me for numbers. And I have to tell him numbers that I don't like saying out of my mouth. Hey, Clint, I need this number by this time. Okay. And then I have to go give him a number, and it's a number that I'm not proud of. Understand that, here's what I'll tell you is, none of you guys like accountability, and neither do I. Does that make sense? I don't like it any more than you, but you need to understand that it's a must-have to grow. Because you, by the way, you're already at your max potential. If you could be further along, you would be further along. So without somebody that's going to come alongside you, Wesley, and challenge you a little bit, which is, by the way, what you're not going to like, right? You don't like, nobody, Thomas was never mean to me. He was never a dick to me, right? He never was like, oh, Clint, you're just not cutting the cake. You're just not cutting it. He was just like, hey, listen, I think you could do better. I think you could be better. Hey, listen, I need you to do this. Hey, Clint, I need you to do this. And you know what? He just never gave up on me. And you know what happened is eventually I realized that he kept having that conversation with me. Maybe he kept having that conversation with me because it was important. And it was something I needed to fix. You guys get what I'm saying? Okay. So we want these new people to get in business and we want them just to light the world on fire, right? Let me ask you a question. So I was having this conversation with Ruben and Wendy, or not Ruben and Wendy. I was having this conversation. I was looking at you, Ruben. So I was having this conversation with Shamar and Caitlin today, and it hit me. We get new people in business, right? So they've got 7 people in their business, 8 people in their business, 9 people in their business, right? And they still haven't hit 1,000 points. And I said, so why is that? Why is that? And so if you think about it, 9 people should be able to go over 1,000 points. Does that make sense? 9 times 150 is what? 1,350? Okay, so it's more than 1,000, right? So 7 people is what? Huh? Okay. So that's what they've got in their business right now. Yeah, they got 7 people, which means they actually have 9, but 7 that are really consistent, right? And I said, so why aren't you over 1,000 points? And I said, Shamar, and I said, you've had some great months in business. I said, there's some months that you did 220 points, right? And I said, that was probably your best month in business. It was last month, right? They're getting better, right? They started out, they weren't doing too hot, and then they created a budget. They got their finances right. They started changing where they were buying their stuff. They are actually doing what the plan said. They got to 220, and here's what happens. They sponsored somebody. Okay? They sponsored somebody. Okay? And then they sponsored somebody else. All right. And the one guy, he's consistent. His name's Corey. It's his cousin, and he's showing up to stuff. And Corey's the guy that I haven't created a budget with. And they're looking at Corey being like, Corey, why haven't you figured out volume yet? Well, why do you think that Corey hasn't figured out volume yet? Because nobody's had that tough conversation with him to say, hey, we need to create a budget. And if I rely on them to have that conversation with them, when's it going to happen? Because Shamar, listen, it's not Shamar's fault. You don't want to do that with your cousin. Do you want to have that conversation with your cousin? You don't want to have that conversation with somebody you don't know, let alone your cousin, right? So this is where I need to come in and have that conversation with Corey. And let me ask you a question. Do you think Corey's in business because he wants to have success? Yeah. So whose job is it to make sure that he has success? So then it's my responsibility to have that conversation. It's not about whether I want to have that conversation. It's my responsibility to have that conversation. Does that make sense? So we were talking about it, and I said, so why is it that you can go 220 and you guys still aren't over 1,000 points? George team is still not over 1,000 points. And here's what it is. They're doing what's convenient. And here's what happens. Shamar and Caitlin have a good month of 220, and Frank has a month that's off. He does 70 points. If you add that up, it's still around 150 points, and they still can't scrape 1,000 points. And so one guy's having a good month, the other guy's having a bad month, and it goes in cycles. Just one has a good month, one has a bad month. One has a good month, one has a bad month. One has a good month. And so it's going to take twice as many people as it should to hit the same amount of volume. Why? Is it because the business isn't stable, or is it because they're not stable? They're not stable. And understand their business is just a reflection of them. So look at volume, and that's how it works. Look at sponsoring, and that's how it works. Because I'm talking to him, and I say, hey, listen, let me ask you a question. When you were going through the numbers, and they were making phone calls, and they were partnering, and all this other stuff, and here's what happened. They did a lot of work for a month. And I said, let me ask you a question, Caitlin. Did you sponsor somebody? Guess what her answer was? What do you think it was? Yeah. But you know what happened? Here's what happened. She got fooled. They did all this work. They sponsored somebody, and guess what? The person didn't do anything. The person didn't show up to any. They got sponsored, and they never saw him again. Never saw him again. And so you know what Shamar and Caitlin started saying? Well, we're just not good enough at the business. What we're doing is not working. Let me ask you a question. Did it work? Exactly like it was supposed to. Is it their fault that he chose not to be accountable? I think not. Now, could it have been their fault that he chose not to be accountable? Yes. Because were they accountable? At that, they were being accountable. But if they weren't being accountable and their downline gets in and is not accountable, guess whose fault that is? It's yours. If you're not moving volume and your downline gets in business and doesn't move volume, it's both of your guys' fault, but it's your fault because you're in charge of making sure that they see results. Well, how can they see results if they haven't seen what it looks like to have results? Right? And I understand that you're brand new in business, but let me ask you a question. Are you taking responsibility for everything that you can take responsibility for? I'm having this conversation with them, and I'm having this epiphany as I'm having this conversation because I'm like, hey, listen, you know what? How many times do we expect for a new person to get in business and them to change the face of my business? We sponsored somebody. Why haven't they done 150? Well, when did you do 150? On the 29th of the month? Well, then you got them in on the 29th of the month. Right? And I'm not saying that you have to be perfect, but why is it that we are judging other people by different standards than we're judging ourselves? You get what I'm saying? When did you get your conference ticket? Are you weighing the cost of everything? Well, I'm only going to do it if it benefits me. Because you want to know why they haven't won 1,000 points? Because they're all worried about whether or not it's going to benefit them. The problem is that if it's always based off, you want to know something? Let me help you out. If it's always based off what benefits you, you'll never have a team. You'll never have a team. I had a guy, had all the potential in the world. Jordan went down and met him. Guy had all the potential in the world, and here's the problem. He couldn't sponsor somebody to save his soul. I drove thousands of miles for this guy. Thousands. People were growing like crazy. Everybody else was growing except him. Couldn't sponsor anybody. You want to know why? He blamed it on the business. He blamed it on everything else. But you know the truth of the matter is, you know his average PV was per month? 10, 20 points. How are you going to sponsor somebody into a business opportunity that you're not even doing? Do you think that when he was talking to them about the opportunity, do you think that he was actually invested and convicted about what he was doing? No. It didn't matter how good a plan I showed. It didn't matter. I went down there and like I would try my hardest to get I had to be as passionate as I could be about it because I knew that he wasn't. Didn't matter. They weren't going to follow him. It's funny because people can smell a fraud from a million miles away. And what I found out is the secret to actually growing fast is not the person that takes the most action. It's the person that actually is responsible for what they actually are supposed to be responsible for. They take responsibility for their business. They take responsibility for what they control. What is that? It's points. It's going out and taking the daily action. It's reading. It's listening. It's doing all those things. But the problem is that people let me kill you. People let things distract them. They let other people decide and they let other people dictate how much action they're going to take. Wouldn't it be goofy, Dave, right? Wouldn't it be goofy, man, if you contacted me and I didn't show up and you let that decide whether or not you could build this business? Do you know that Shamar and Caitlin, when this guy got started for them, they were all excited, right? They thought their business was going to change overnight. And here's what happened. It didn't. And so they immediately blamed it on themselves and they immediately scaled back everything they were doing because it was their fault. You know what's funny is they wanted to take responsibility for it not working. The problem is that was the one responsibility that wasn't theirs. It's the one responsibility that's not theirs. Hey, Dave, do you know that I can't control whether or not you come? I can encourage you. I can tell you that it's going to be worth it. I can try to put all the numbers up here that I can and show you. I can give you pictures. I can show you the checks. I can do all that stuff, right? But at the end of the day, whose decision is it? It is, isn't it? My question is, are you doing everything in your power to make sure that you succeed and you're a good example? I'm not trying to put a bunch of pressure on you here. But what I am trying to do is I'm trying to help you guys understand that you guys shouldn't be trying to avoid responsibility. You shouldn't be trying to avoid ownership. Listen, you want to know when you sponsor the fastest, and you want to know when people are, how many of you guys want to have a huge team and people that'll follow you? Then get excited about paying a price that other people won't pay. Because when you are willing to pay a price that other people won't pay, people will automatically admire you and they'll follow you. The problem is everybody wants the following, but they're not willing to pay the price. You have to pay the price. That makes sense? You have to pay the price. And it's not a bad thing. Like, hey, listen, for 2.5 years, I mean, I don't know, Addie, you tell me. I'm not going to put a number out there, but when we lived in Raleigh, how often was I home before midnight? Like on a weekly basis, how many times? So four days a week. 3 a.m. Did I have a full-time job? Did I work every day? So am I saying that that's what you're going to have to do? No. I chose to live in Raleigh, so I had to drive a lot. Am I doing that now? No, thank God. I don't have to do that anymore. Does that make sense? But I was driving 2 hours to get to you guys, which actually meant 4 hours because I would drive here and back. I would drive 2 hours to Greenville, there and back. When I went to Edenton, it was 3 hours there and 3 hours back. Okay? You do that every night for about how long? Was it a week? Was it 2 weeks? How long do you think it was? 2.5 years. 2.5 years. Do you guys have to do that? No. And you know what? You guys can get the same results I have. You guys just don't have to drive as far. I chose to live there. Does that make sense? So with that choice came a responsibility to the people that I said I was going to help. Because it was my choice, which means I also had to make the choice to be a man of my word. Does that make sense? Listen, I'm not telling you guys have to be out till 3 in the morning. Wesley, hear me. You don't have to be out till 3 in the morning. Your wife would kill you. Right? Does that make you? Would you agree? Yeah. She would kill you. Okay? But my point is Addie and I made that decision to go to Raleigh together. Okay? And with that decision came another decision that had to be made. Right? And so why do I tell you that? Because I'm not trying to get you to stay out till 3 in the morning. What I'm trying to get you to understand is that when you pay a price, there's also comes a sense of pride with that. When I got home at night, I knew that nobody else was doing that. Right? I knew that nobody else was doing that. They would go to team meetings and I would hear people talking about, oh yeah, we drove 2,000 miles. And I was like, oh great, that was half of a month for me. That's cute. I drove over 1,000 miles a week. And listen, there was a sense of pride, right? Because I knew I deserved success. My question for you is, are you taking enough responsibility in your business where you look at yourself and you can look at yourself in the mirror and you say, hey, listen, I deserve to have success. Is that how you look at your business? Are you looking at your business like, I hope it works? Or are you looking at your business like, this thing owes me something, it better pay me? How are you looking at it? Because as long as you try to avoid the cost, you're also going to avoid your reward. It's not about going out and being out till 3 in the morning. That's not the point. Don't listen to that and say, oh, I've got to be out till 3. I can't do that. I'm going to quit. Don't do that. I'm not telling you that. But what I am saying is that there's a certain amount of work that you know needs to be done. And most of it's just responsibility. Hey, listen, if you know that somebody in your downline is having a hard time financially and you don't want to have the conversation with them, don't you think you probably should go to your upline and say, hey, listen, man, I don't think I'm ready to have this conversation. Will you have this conversation on my behalf? Hey, that's your responsibility. Your responsibility is not to have all the answers. Your responsibility is to be the conduit that gives them all the answers. Does that mean that you don't give them any answers and you bypass all responsibility to your upline? No. Right? Does that make sense? But I'm telling you, control what you can control. You know, I'll end with this. Addie and I's first month in business, we had no customers. We did 7 points. We did 7 points. I bought a case of energy drinks. And because we got in business on the 25th of the month, 22nd of the month. It was like 22nd, 23rd, somewhere in there, 25th, something like that. And so we did 7 points. I bought 1 case of energy drinks, and that was it. Why did I only buy 1 case of energy drinks? Because I wouldn't answer the phone to let Thomas help me. Because I was going to do it on my own. Okay? But understand that first month that I was in business, I did 7 points. And I remember what it felt like to not hit my goal. I remember what it felt like to have to get on the, like, guys, I'm going to be honest with you. Any of you guys ever not hit your goal? Not ever accomplish what you said you were going to accomplish? Any of you guys ever done that? Come up short? Okay. And you know what I didn't want to do when Thomas called me the next month? I didn't want to answer the phone. Why? Because I was ashamed. I was ashamed. But you know what's really cool? And I've never met anybody like this until I met Thomas. But when he called me a couple times. I finally answered the phone and I said, and he said, "Hey, what's up, man?" And do you know that he asked me, he said, "How do you feel last month went?" And I said, well, I didn't go as well as I wanted it to. And he goes, well, it happens, right? All of us have months that are off. But the goal is not to have them, not to continue to have them. He said, so what can we put in place to fix that? And I said, well, I don't know. I said, I know nothing about the business, right? It's pretty obvious. I did 7 points. Okay. And so I said, I'm going to do 150 points this month. And you know that ever since then, I've never missed 150 points. I've never missed 150 points. Addie and I right now, we average over 600 points a month. Why did I tell you that? I tell you that to brag? No, I don't tell you that to brag because I don't think that that's a big deal. We've been doing this for 7 years. I should do more PV than you. Does that make sense? But my point is let me ask you a question. Do you guys know that not all the time did all my customers come through and buy when they said they were going to buy? And I still went 150 every month. Do you know that sometimes it put me in a tight spot and made me make it made me make a decision that typically I was not comfortable making? You guys get what I'm saying? Do you guys know that I hated sales and I was scared to death to talk to people about products when I got in business? And I know some of you guys are too. And you know what? I realized that that wasn't Thomas's problem. That was my problem. But I said that I was going to do what I was going to do, right? And so no matter what, I did it. It was my job to overcome my fears. It was my job to go ask Thomas questions to overcome my fears. It wasn't Thomas's job to play 25 questions with me and see what was wrong with me and what I was struggling with and all this stuff. I needed to go to him with questions so then he could help me overcome what I was struggling with. Does that make sense? So here's what I had to do. I had to be vulnerable. I had to be vulnerable. Hey, Thomas, I hate sales. Nobody's buying from me. I don't know what's going on. I've given out a lot of samples, Thomas, and it's just not working. Right? And I had to be vulnerable with him. And I had to say, hey, dude, this is what's going on. And he said, oh, that's easy. Just do this, change this, do this. And you know what? He said, come to conference. And I'll never forget this. I was at a conference. And I'm at this conference, right? I'm at this conference. The conference gets over. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm exhausted. Right? I'm exhausted. All I want to do is go back to bed. And Thomas goes, hey, listen, we're all going to go out to the hallway and chat. So I'll go out to the hallway, and I'm like, can I just go to bed? I just want to go to bed. At this time, Addie and I had one customer, my mom. Okay? and maybe my grandma. We might have had 2. And I remember I'm out in the hallway and I hear this guy, some guy that had a 4,000 point business. He was my cross line. Okay. And he was kicking my butt in business. Right. He's my cross line. He's kicking my butt in business. And I hear him talking and I'm like, wait, say that again? He's talking about customer volume. Right. And he's like, yeah, you just have to ask for the sale. And I'm like, what do you mean you have to ask for the sale? So tell me how you do it. He said, yeah, you give them the sample and you have them try the sample. And as soon as they try the sample, you say, hey, listen, you know what I'm going to be putting in an order for me? I can throw on a box for you. This whole time I've been trying to send people to my website. Just go check out my website. Just go check it out. Just go check out my website. Right? Why? Because I was trying to avoid a tough conversation. Right? Because it was a lot easier just to say, go check out my website, and then walk away because they weren't going to tell me no to go check out my website. They just wouldn't go check it out. Does that make sense? And here's it was. I was saying, oh, well, the business doesn't work. Was the business not working, or was I not doing the work to build the business? I wasn't doing the work to build the business. I had unrealistic expectations. Right? So I had to get around somebody, and it was by accident I heard this. Do you know that the next month I had nobody on my team? Nobody. Oh, I take that back. We had one person on our team. We had one person on our team. They were moving like 0.10 points. Okay? And I was so upset. I was so pissed off. And I was like, you know what? If you're not going to do what it takes to build a business, I'll build it by my damn self. Get out of my way. And you know what? I got my first sale, and it like opened the floodgates. That month we went 600 points. Do you know how many points Addie and I moved? Over 600. Why? Because I learned how to ask for the sale. I sponsored somebody. He worked with me, and guess what? He saw me do it, and he said, I could do that. And literally we would take turns. The people that walked in our office, we would take turns selling. We didn't, like, during lunch, we used to go back and take naps. You didn't want to go back and take a nap because you might miss a customer. You might miss an opportunity to give a sample. Right? And I knew that if I wasn't there to give him the sample, he was going to give him the sample, which means he was going to make the money and I wasn't. Right? And at that point, it was like, well, hey, listen, he's on my team. I want him to make the money anyway, right? But I also was at the point where I was like, hey, listen, I don't want this fool I don't want him to outdo me. I was giving up sleep so I didn't miss a sale. Right? Because I finally understood the right way to do something. But it takes somebody that's willing to seek it. You're not going to be able to just sit back and wait for it to hit you. It's not going to happen. But do you know, once I mastered that, do you know I never have to master that again? You know, I know how to sell now. To this day, I can still sell. Really easy. You want to know why? Because I realized it's not about sales. It's about it's about having proper expectation. It's about having the right perspective about what we're trying to accomplish. Does that make sense? So, sponsoring is the same way. Building your business is the same way. Do you know that once I learned how to do that, my business image went up? The way I looked at my business and the way I looked at me went up. It changed. You guys get what I'm saying? Listen, you guys need to master these skills, not for any other reason than the way you see yourself. Excuse me. So, we need to be making sure that we're taking responsibility for you on down. And you're accountable from you on up. Does that make sense? You're accountable for everybody on your team, to the person in your upline. Until somebody on your team says, hey, listen, I don't need you to do everything for me anymore. Some people say that, and then here's what they do. They can't get any results, though. Right? And so it's not about just, oh, I'm willing to do it. Listen, I was willing to do it from the get-go. But did I still need Thomas's help for a while? Yeah. It's not about being perfect, guys. It's about producing a result. Why are you in business, Allison? So what's going to create income for you? Results. Results. Does that make sense? We want to help you create results. And the way you're going to create results is through responsibility, taking responsibility from you for your actions and for your business. Does you guys follow me on this? All right, don't get confused. Don't worry about what they're doing. If you sponsor somebody, Wesley, and they don't show up to stuff, here's what you do. You just keep inviting them to everything and then you go sponsor somebody else. Can you control what they're doing? No, but you can sure the heck can go out and sponsor somebody else, can't you? Because here's what I realized. If you can sponsor one, if you sponsor them, can you sponsor another? It doesn't matter if they're the biggest tards on the world. If you sponsor one, can you sponsor two? Then there's nothing stopping you from going diamond. Nothing. If you can sponsor one, you can sponsor 100. Right? All right, so now let's wrap this up. How many of you guys had people that could have been here tonight that weren't here? Why didn't we call them? Why didn't we do that? And if you're not going to call them, it's okay. Maybe you're not ready to have that tough conversation yet. And that's fine, but understand that that's why your upline's here. Right? Hey, you know what? Nobody's going to look at you and say, well, the only reason you have a guest here is because I called them for you. You know what they're going to, you know what they're going to do? They're going to look at you and say, why didn't we call them? Right? How are we going to get to over 100 people in here? It's not by missing opportunities. We need to capitalize on all the opportunities we have. Okay? So, same thing is true about going to conference. Same thing is true about the next team meeting. Same thing is true about this upcoming conference call. Listen, everybody needs to be on all these things. It's not guys, I'm not telling you this because I'm trying to rally. It's not because I'm trying to get you excited. I'm telling you this because there's no way you're going to make it if you don't go to conferences, you don't come to meetings, and you don't attend the events that we put on. Listen, I don't put on a meeting on Wednesday night because I'm so bored I just want to leave my house. I put on a meeting Wednesday night because I know if I don't do this, guess what will happen? Everything that's here, everything that I've spent this whole time building will go away. Does that make sense? Some of you guys have worked really, really hard to get to where you're at. I don't care if you're in business and you have nobody in business other than yourself. Some of you guys have worked really, really hard to get where you're at as yourself. Don't look at that and be like, oh, I have nothing to show for it. Yeah, you do. You have you to show for it. And if you have you, guess what you can do? You can create a team again. Listen, you have to be consistent. You have to be consistent. Okay? All right. So we need to wrap up volume. My question for you is, look on your downline right now. Who in your downline still has points to move? How many points do they still have to move? And who in your downline is close to the next pin? Meaning, like, if they're at 250 points, could we create 300 points in their business? If they're at 550 points, like George's business, could we get them to 600? Right? If they're at 900 points, if they're at 875 points, can we get them to 1,000? I think we can, right? Like if you get 9 people and all you need to move is 125 points, hey, listen, who needs a case of excess? You get 9 people to buy a case of excess, you're looking at 90 points. There you go. You're getting pretty close right there. Create a few customers there and you're done. Over 1,000. You guys get what I'm saying? It's not that hard. Okay? But if you don't know that it's there, then you can't help people achieve it. All right? This is all about taking this in bite-sized pieces. All right? So who in your team still needs to move points? Who in your team has people that we could show the plan to this weekend? Maybe it's you. Get with your upline. Who in your team hasn't got their conference ticket yet? Okay. When are they getting it? Can we help them get it? Can we help them create a budget for it? Do they want to figure it out? Right? These are all questions that we need to find out. Okay. All right. Who had a guest out tonight? When are we following up with them? When are we following up with them? What is the game plan? Are we going to get them their conference ticket? Are we going to get them to help them put in leave? Do they need to create a budget? Maybe. Listen, here's what I've learned is I'm yet to sponsor somebody that's got so much money they don't need a budget. I don't care who they are. I haven't done it yet. And the people that have a lot of money, they have a lot of money because they have a budget. Right? Does that make sense? And so, do they need a budget? Okay. And then the last thing is how can we get in front of them? When are we going to sit down with them next? You know, who's going to call them? If you're brand new, and you're not comfortable getting on the phone with them by yourself because you know they're going to ask you a million questions, then here's what you need to do. Call your upline and say, hey, listen, I know that who was the guy you had out tonight? So Christian, right? So we had Christian out tonight. I don't know if I'm comfortable getting on the phone with him yet, but you know what? Here's the deal. I know that he needs to be called, right? I know that he needs to be followed up with. When are we going to do that? And then you put it in your calendar, he puts it in his calendar, or you put it in your calendar, he puts it in his calendar, I put it in mine. And so then here's what happens is now we're all accountable, right? How many of you guys have got a contact before? Okay, now let me ask you a question. How many of you guys have asked for partnership or asked for your upline to call? Okay, so how many of you guys called if they were supposed to call your person at 9 p.m., okay, and you know they've got a bigger business than you, right, because they're your upline, okay, they're probably helping more than just you. How many people called them at 8:45 and said, hey, don't forget you have a phone call? Did you do that? Did you call at 9:15 and say, hey, listen, how'd it go? Or did you want them just to call you and that's your downline, right? They're not perfect. So let's get in this together. Let's make sure we're doing our part. Let's create a partnership. That's how we're going to create growth. Hey, listen, when we have that kind of partnership with each other, your downline's going to get in business and they're going to want that partnership with you. Does that make sense? So thank you guys. Have a good night.
They're gonna be worried about what they're wearing now.
They're going to be worried about how many beers they've had in their throat. Okay, so it's not a good day to move volume. So you want to make sure that you guys are getting on this immediately. Okay, and if you guys already are at your volume goal, well, can you sell more? I'm not telling you to buy more, but let me ask you a question. Name one business that makes $300, and they say, "Hey, we're closing the door for this." Who does that? You know, but that's the way people treat this business. Well, I hit my volume goal. I did my part. Well, I get it, but I don't get it. Because it's like Ruben always says, if you can do more, shouldn't you? You know? And here's the thing. What if somebody actually does have customers that fall through, but you don't, and you have some extra that you need to move, and then you don't, and then it keeps people, maybe it keeps your upline from hitting their goal. Not me, maybe, but what if, like James is trying to hit 2,500 this month? James, if everybody does what they're supposed to do and does the minimum of what they're supposed to do, how many points shy are you? 300. 300 points. So the nice thing about it is you got enough people on your team where if everybody moves an extra case or two of excess, it's all taken care of. Right? Mm-hmm. Matt, have you figured out how many points you're shy of 2,500 if everybody does what they're supposed to do?
5.
Okay. Well, so how are we going to fix that? Or are we just going to say maybe next month? Listen, I think the mentality of maybe next month needs to go away. Maybe next month, maybe next month. Hey, listen, you're earning 600, right? So is it okay to go back down to 590? Is it okay to go back to 550? I don't think so. You know, if you're, I mean, do you understand? I mean, like your team, do they understand how big a role they play and you hitting that goal? Okay. So have we talked to, do they all have plans? Do you know what your group is? Okay. Listen, guys, this isn't about me. This isn't about you. It's about us. Does that make sense? It's about creating a vacuum, like I was talking about, like, you know, Saminia, okay, Caitlin and Shamar. Caitlin and Shamar have never been to 300 before. If they go 300, if they become new 300 this month, Saminia will be a new 600, and when Saminia is a new 600, George will be a new 1,000. And you might say, well, good for them. Okay, well, let me ask you a question. If you're on their team and you're a new 450, okay, do you know that you're going to be the next new 600? Right? If you're in this room and you know you're maybe a 3,000, do you know that if you have the mentality and you breathe the mentality of next month, you know, always saying maybe next month, maybe next month, maybe next month, you know, hey, no, we're going to go 3,000, then we're going to go 3,300, and then we're going to go 3,400, or maybe you go 3,700. But why is it always next month we're going to have a better month? This is something we've fallen into the, like this is something it's a disease. Mm-hmm. Maybe next month, maybe next month, maybe no. How about this month? How about this month we're better than we were last month, and how about the next month we're better than we are this month? Stop relying on new people to come in and fix your inadequacies. Fix your inadequacies yourself, so then you can be a good example for the new people. Right? Listen, it starts with the core. We got to get the core right, and then we get the core people are, I'm not going to get into, so core people are the people that attend everything. They're your guys. They're people that stay for the train. They're people that have that mentality, right? Because we talked about this, David, right? We talked about people that, you know, 20% of the people do 80% of the work, right? You're part of the 20%. You're brand new. You didn't even realize it. And you're like, hey, listen, you know what? You probably look at your business and you're like, I'm not that good yet. I would take 50 of you in a heartbeat. Why? Well, because I could tell you want it. Do you know that there are people that aren't here right now? I take 50 of you. You guys need to understand how special you are. I was reading an article, and there was it was an audio, and there's this lady, and she mentors all types of Hollywood A-list actors, and her number one rule for every single one of them is to have "you're more than enough" on their mirror. You're more than enough. You're good enough. That's her only rule to mentor a coach. They have to have that on the mirror. She said because even them, they're always beating themselves up, thinking they're not good enough, not pretty enough, not skinny enough, not whatever, right? So what is it that you're beating yourself up about? Right? Take responsibility for you. Do the best you can every day. Leave it on the field. All right? So we got a lot of work to do. I love you guys. Thank you guys for doing what you guys do. For real. I know it's not easy. Hey, listen, there's a lot of things you guys could be doing tonight other than sitting here. I don't take that for granted. But we need to win. And it's not going to happen because somebody else does it. It's going to happen because we do it. You do your part, I'll do mine. Your part's just as important as my part. And I know that. Listen, Addie and I, we move 600 points out of the 7,500. We do a minuscule amount of the total goal. Right? And let me put it this way. The bigger the team gets, the lesser percentage that we do of our goal. Okay? Addie and I are just a small part. And right now, you might be a huge part of your goal. If you're in this room and you're the only person on your team, I remember what that's like. Right? But, hey, Allison, how cool is it that your 150 points right now might be a lot to your team, right? But you sponsor a few people like the one you brought up tonight, and your 150 points won't be that big a deal. I mean, you still have to do it. But how cool is it that your 150 points or your 300 points will be 10% of 3,000. It'll be 5% of 6,000. You're doing 5% of the work that your business is generating. Right? How cool is that? So it's time to grow. So love you guys.